Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. First of all, let me apologize for taking 2 weeks to make a video. I know that may seem like a while. It's not because I've run out of information, I've run out of things to say, and I'm just kind of desperate for material. No, quite the contrary. Since we're talking about biblical interpretation, I actually have too much to say. So I needed to kind of take a break and step back and figure out how I was going to approach this. I'm still not convinced that the videos that I'm going to make on this subject will be necessarily in some sort of order, some sort of perfect progression, but I sure hope that every individual video will be valuable to you in better understanding how to interpret the Bible, how to avoid misinterpreting it, and how to handle it accurately, as Paul instructed Timothy in 2 Timothy 2 in verse 15. With that said, I want to talk about genre. Genre means literary form, and different literary forms perform different functions. So, for instance, if you were to read in a fantasy novel about dragons taking over the world, you would think, well, that's pretty cool. But if you were to read that in the newspaper, well, you'd probably be freaking out that, hey, I need to get the family out of here, we need to move, we need to go underground or something because dragons are taking over the world. And I just want to show you that that's that different reaction is because you're reading something in a totally different genre. Because on the one hand, the fantasy novel, the fiction novel, is designed to take you out of this world. It's to bring you to a realm that's out of the norm of what normally goes on, and to take you somewhere that's not real, to give you a break from reality. The problem is the newspaper, on the other hand, is supposed to tell you about reality. It's supposed to report about the world that you're living in. And so if you read about dragons in the newspaper, it's going to give you a whole different reaction than if you were to read about it in the fantasy novel. It's the same thing with the Bible, that the Bible was written to us in different genres. Okay, God communicates to us with different literary forms. For instance, you may have law. So you're reading down, and verse by verse, you just have law after law after law, kind of like a constitution. Okay, or a rule book, maybe you could think of it that way. You also have historical narrative. All right, historical narrative is just going to tell you about history, what really happened in the history of God's people. You also have wisdom literature, which makes general observations about the world and how God's word applies in different situations in life under the sun. You also have prophecy, which makes a large use of poetry. And then you have apocalyptic literature, which is highly symbolic, highly figurative, to basically describe certain truths that are going on in the world, but in a very, very visual, illustrative sort of way. Let me show you why that's important in interpretation. Look in Proverbs 22, and in verse 6. Now keep in mind, again, Proverbs, this is wisdom literature, so these are general observations about how life works. Well, Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now here's the thing, if someone were to view Proverbs as law, and that it was a genre of law, well then they would look at this and say, well, this just isn't true, because I've seen people who've trained their children in the Lord and they grow up and they leave the Lord. So this law is false, and the writer's false, and therefore God is false. Well, the problem is this isn't law. This is wisdom literature, which means it's general observations. It means these things aren't always going to be true. But general wisdom teaches that, yes, if you raise your child right, he's going to grow up right. Yeah, that's the point. But do you see that if you misinterpret and you don't take into account the genre, you're going to misinterpret what the verse is saying? Same thing with apocalyptic literature, especially like that in Revelation, right? In Revelation, you learn in Revelation 12 that Satan is called this great dragon, and you have all kinds of figurative things like frog demons, and you have all kinds of weird statements like there's only 144,000 in heaven, and so people just take those things literally, and they say, oh yeah, Satan, he must really look like a big dragon, and yeah, there's only going to be 144,000 people in heaven, and everybody else is just going to be lost. But when they make those interpretations, they're not taking genre into consideration, because apocalyptic literature is is highly symbolic. It's highly figurative on purpose, and it's not meant to be pushed to its literal meaning. And that's very important because that affects our interpretation. And that's the way it is with really everything we read in the Bible. Genre is so important, so I hope that that's helpful. And Lord willing, I'll see you next time.